Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today, I have a very special guest on the channel with me. This is Mr. Stephen Willeford, also known as the Barefoot Defender. And I would love to have a moment here to kind of allow him to share his story. And we're going to have just a very informal chat about his experiences, his love for the Second Amendment. He is a model American, a wonderful fellow. He is larger than life in so many ways. Stephen, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Thanks for having me on today.
You've had a very storied life. I've had the luck of getting to talk to you about a lot of interesting things, and I know we're going to discuss a lot of things. But you've been through a rough road.
I have, but what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, doesn't it?
That's right. That's right. So now, you've accepted a position with GOA. You've been traveling around, talking to folks. You're talking to the media. You're conducting interviews. You're doing radio shows. You're getting out there and spreading your message, spreading your story. Now, I know everything you've been through, and I know a lot of our viewers know everything that you've been through. But maybe we ought to start at Sutherland and kind of discuss, start from what made you sort of dive headfirst into this situation, and what's defined your role and what you're doing today?
So I guess that morning, we'll just start off with that morning. And that morning, I woke up that morning. I normally attended a church that was about 40 miles away in San Antonio, Texas. And So, and it wasn't like I didn't have dealings with the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs. I did. I delivered toys with them on my Harley Davidson during Christmas time, and I did. My kids went to Awanas at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, so I was very familiar with that. And also, my great-grandfather, when I was a little bitty boy, would actually take me to church there, and he would pick me up and he would hold me up, and I would grab the bell rope and he'd pull me up and down and ring the bell, bringing people to the church in the morning. So I was very familiar with the church, but I didn't attend there normally. And that morning, I chose not to attend any church that morning because I was going to start an on-call at the hospital where I worked. And so 1 out of every 8 weeks, and I don't believe anything's coincidence. So 1 out of every 8 weeks, we would have to carry a pager, and we would be on call. Millennials don't know what a pager is. It's this little square box that will start making noise and vibrate and stuff, and will catch you where your cell phone doesn't. And you would have 10 minutes to call into work and then another hour to get to work to take care of emergencies. And since you had a day crew, normally that would be, 1, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock at night, and we would have an hour to get to work and fix any emergency. So I knew I was going to have to do that, and I was going to put at least probably 20 to 30 hours in extra for my day, for my week that week. So I decided I was going to hang out and relax, and I was in bed, hanging out barefoot, relaxing in my bed. And to set the scene, I guess, and I, kind of go into that because it's important. My wife got up that morning and she said, well, since you're not going to go to church, I'm going to go to work on Rachel's house. Rachel was my younger daughter of my 2 daughters. She was married at the time, and she was pregnant with my very first grandbaby. And they had moved in with us because we were building her house for her and her husband, and we were doing it from scratch. And my wife's an amazing person. I don't think anybody is as amazing as my wife, because she decides that she's going to learn how to do something, and then she just does it. She was taping and floating the walls at Rachel's house at the time, getting it ready to be painted. And so she said, well, I'm going to go work on Rachel's house. And my older daughter, interesting enough, had moved back into the house at that point. And why she did is she was engaged to be married. And she didn't want to sign another contract with a apartment complex that would stick her with a contract when she married her husband. She wanted to be able to, she had just finished the contract, and so she wanted to be able to just move in with her husband when she got married. So she decided she was going to stay at our house and live with us until then. And if you're going to live at my house rent-free, you're going to do chores.
So this started out as any average American Sunday morning that anyone could experience. I mean, this is painting a very familiar picture that many of us do on Sundays.
I'm a very common man. And my daughter was washing dishes, doing chores. I was hanging out in my bedroom, checking my messages and, searching Facebook and, doing the lazy thing because I was going to have to work a lot this coming week. And my older daughter was washing the dishes. She came into our room and said, "Dad, doesn't that sound like gunfire?" And at first, it was real muffled. The part of my house where my bedroom was, my master bedroom, we had closed in later. My house was built in 1972 and didn't have real good insulation, but we closed in our carport and made a master bedroom out of it. We used modern insulation, and we had double pane windows, and so it was a whole lot more muffled in my bedroom. And I thought it sounded like someone tapping at my window. And I ran over and opened up the curtain to see outside, and I couldn't see anything. And my daughter said, "Come into the kitchen. It's louder there." So I went into the kitchen. As soon as I left my bedroom, I realized it was gunfire. I've been a pistol instructor for a youth club. I've been a competitive shooter and stuff for many, many years, and I know very much what gunfire sounds like. And I told her, yes, it's gunfire. I ran to my safe, and my daughter ran outside and jumped in her Honda Fit and ran up the road to find out what was going on. Now, and that's a different story altogether. My daughter ran into gunfire in her car. I ran to my safe, and the first thing I did is grabbed a rifle out of the safe, grabbed a magazine, and people ask, why did you grab an AR-15? And my answer is, if you know you're going into battle and you have a choice of a pistol or a rifle, always choose a rifle. So I grabbed an AR-15. I popped open a box of ammunition, and I just grabbed a handful, and I called my wife and said, "Where are you at?" She said, "I'm at Rachel's house. I'm taping and floating walls." I said, "Stay where you're at." She could hear the panic in my voice, and she said, "What's going on?" I said, "There's somebody shooting up the church." And she said, "Don't go over there," and I hung up.
Now, Stephen, at what point when you heard this gunfire did you make the association that it wasn't just recreational shooting? Because obviously you're in Texas. There's things going on. I mean, people shoot all the time, right? I mean, like in Texas. So it would seem like, all right, now this wasn't just recreational gunfire. What gave you the thought that something ain't right? This isn't just someone shooting in their yard or shooting.
It was rapid fire, and it was just pauses to reload, and I knew it, and then continued rapid fire.
You could sort of paint a picture in your head of what was going on by what you were hearing.
And in nothing else, I was going out to make sure.
Okay.
I was going out to find out.
Sure.
And I didn't know exactly what was going on at the moment.
But you were going to be ready.
But I wasn't going out empty-handed.
That's right.
And people ask me, and this is an important part too, is right now with Congress considering laws that would make it mandatory that you lock your guns away in a safe. I had mine locked away in a safe. And while I was turning the dial, I could hear the shots. The shots that I very much knew were aimed at people that I cared about. And I timed it several times, over and over, to see what my fastest time to opening that safe was and getting the gun out and stuff. I timed it afterwards. And the best time that I got after unlocking my safe, grabbing a rifle, grabbing a magazine, and a box of ammunition and started poking rounds in it, I lost 91 seconds. That's a minute and a half that I will never get back.
A lot can happen in a minute and a half.
He was shooting and killing people within the church for 91 seconds while I was loading a magazine and getting a rifle. This is important to the narrative now, where they're trying to make it where you must lock your guns away. And you know, people in the gun world say, why did you have your gun locked away without a loaded magazine? And my response is a couple of years before, I had gotten burglarized and my safe was locked and all my guns were in my safe except one. The burglar was able to get that one gun that I normally carried as a sidearm. He was able to get that. And for the next couple of months, I feared coming home to the burglar again, and this time he would be armed with my own gun. So I started making a habit of unloading and locking my guns in the safe, every one of them. And that day, it was not the best idea, and I realized that. And if I lose another gun to a burglar, that will be one thing. Now, I'm not saying that just anyone should leave all their guns accessible. That's going to be up to you and your choice, and I believe that. And I believe that your circumstances should dictate what you do. If you have small children that are curious enough that they want to get to the guns, I would say if they're within 8 years and older, that they should be trained and told not to mess with the guns and put out of reach of them. And, but you are the one that needs to decide, and not Congress or make a law to say you must keep your guns locked away, because in those cases, I know if I would have been there 15 seconds earlier, Chris Workman would still be walking.
So your daughter hops in her Honda, heads down the road to see what's going on, that you're fishing you've taken 91 seconds to fish your AR out of the safe. You got a magazine, a handful of ammo. What happened next?
So I'm running to the door, and my daughter burst in the door and said, "Dad, there's a guy in black tactical gear shooting up the church."
How do you process that? What went through your mind at that moment when your daughter told you that?
Yeah, well, the first thing I asked her is, I said, "Did you call 911? She said they're aware of it. So she had called 911, and they weren't staying on the phone. In Wilson County, we don't have a big 911, center or anything. When you call 911, they put you straight through dispatch answers. And dispatch was getting flooded with 911 calls at this moment, and some of the calls were coming from the people within the church.
Wow.
And so when she would answer a 911 call, dispatch would answer it and say, "There's a shooting going on in Sutherland Springs." She'd say, "I'm aware of it," and hang up. So that's what they did with my daughter.
And that was the only information they had, was that they knew, and that's all they knew.
Yeah. So my daughter said they're aware of it. Right away, what that told me is police are coming, and they're coming hard, and they're coming to a mass shooting in a church. And I'm running across the street barefoot with an AR-15 in my hands. If the police come up on me, I'm more afraid of the police than I am the shooter himself.
That's a good point. You know, that is something that I've always mentioned in a lot of my videos, Stephen, is that, you know, if you do respond to some type of a shooting, I mean, how are the police going to know that you're the good guy and not the aggressor?
As the general public, this is what you need to know, is that police officer doesn't know when he drives up. He doesn't know. And the general public needs to understand that. I decided at that split second, if I saw a police cruiser, I was going to toss my rifle. I was going to hit the ground with my arms spread out and start yelling, "He's still in there, he's still in there," and hopefully they could hear the shots and respond. But there were no police there. And if there's no police there, I'm responsible.
So you were the thin, barefoot line, Stephen.
Yeah. So as I ran out the door, my daughter followed me out the door. And I thought, I believe at that moment I was covered with the Holy Spirit because I was thinking so clearly, crystal clear. I told her, I said, go back in the house, find me another magazine and load me a magazine. Now, I knew she couldn't find a magazine, load it, and come running out in a gunfight and hand me a magazine for my rifle. But I didn't want her following me over there. And
that was a good way to get her distracted so she wouldn't.
Well, in construction, I've been in charge of crews before, and when you have an apprentice mainly that's just in your hair and always looking for something and whatever, and you're dealing with something and you can't deal with him, you send him to do what we call busy work. You send him to do something, and hopefully it's something he can't even accomplish, to get him out of the way, look like he's doing something, and get his mind off of bothering you at the time when you've got bigger things going on.
And you didn't want her in harm's way.
And that's it. And later on, she got mad at me. She said, Dad, really, you sent me for busy work? And it's like, but babe, it's because I love you so much. He already had more targets that I cared deeply about. And I didn't need her as a distraction. And I certainly didn't want her to see me fail. If I would have failed and he would have shot me, she would have run to my side and he would have killed her next. And I didn't need that. I didn't need that on my mind. And so I sent her back in the house to do busy work. And as I ran across the street, I yelled out. And again, as a shooter with some tactical training and stuff, yelling out is not a response that I would come to my mind. Why would I do that? And again, if you look back in the Bible, when Jesus walked into the garden with the two possessed men, the demons within those men cried out and said, "We know who you are. Have you come here to torment us before our time?" And Jesus called those demons out of those men and sent them into the pigs. And the pigs ran over a cliff and died. I believe that was the same voice that cried out from me. I can't call demons out. But I think the Holy Spirit called the demon out that was in that man. And he had just shot Chris Workman in the back. Chris Workman was the praise ministry leader. He would play his guitar and lead the singing and stuff. And he shot Chris in the back, instantly paralyzing Chris from the waist down. And then he shot Chris's mother through the breast. And he was walking over, and what he would do is he would shoot people with his rifle and then walk over at point blank and finish them off with his pistol. And Chris said he had walked over and he was pointing his pistol directly at Chris. And Chris said, I'm going to meet the Lord. And then Chris heard me yell out. And apparently the shooter did also, because he stopped what he was doing at that moment. It wouldn't have taken him 2 more seconds to finish Chris and his mother off. But he stopped what he was doing at that moment, and he dropped his rifle in the church and came out from the church shooting at me with his pistol. And I can't explain why he would do that, but he did. And he came outside.
You caught him by surprise, Stephen.
He came outside, and he started shooting at me, and I ran behind a pickup truck because some of my training taught me go for cover. And there's a difference in tactical between cover and concealment. Concealment hides you. Cover will stop bullets. I ran behind a pickup truck, and he hit the truck in front of me, and I came up over the hood, and he hit the car behind me, shattering the windshield, and he hit the house behind me. I'm standing with my feet, even with the front tires of the truck, and a 6.2-liter V8 Hemi engine standing between me and him. And I looked at what was my worst nightmare. I looked at a man that was in Class 3 body armor in a ballistic bulletproof helmet. And the shield had a shield that came down to just about his nose level, and it was tinted, dark tinted. And he could have been a robot for all I knew.
Do you have anything protecting his groin?
No, he didn't, but he was moving. He wasn't dilly-dallying along. And I was able to hit him in the chest. I was able to hit him in the abdomen. And the crazy part of this is, Eric, is I used to shoot on a church pistol team. And we called ourselves the Sinners. It was a team of 5, and we used to compete together. And you had to have a name for the team, and the name sinning in the Bible, the word sin, is actually a old archery term, meaning missing the target. And so we
Really?
Yes. From the original translation, sin is missing the target. It's an archery term.
Wow.
So we chose that so that somewhat educational for people that would say, hey, these guys are calling themselves the sinners, and we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory anyway. And that meant missing the target. So we chose that. Well, one of our sinners, one of our church team that competed together was a former Army Ranger and a San Antonio police officer. And so we would train in between competitions. Him and I would train together. And I said earlier that I don't believe that there's coincidences at all in this world. For 3 weeks straight, he trained me what to do if ever confronted with body armor. And what his training told me is hit him in the body armor, they will feel it. I hit him in the left chest. I hit him in the abdomen. Both of those, I know that for a fact because the coroner's report said he had a bruise on his chest, he had a bruise on his abdomen. He felt those rounds. And this officer told me, he said, hit him in the chest, hit him in the body armor, they'll feel it, and look for your chance. Hit him once in the side, once in the hips, once in the legs. He said, those are the 3 areas you aim at. He said, one in the side will kill him. The one in the hips is called an anchor shot. It will stop him. The one in the legs will slow him down. Look for those 3 opportunities. When I hit him in the abdomen, the chest, he real quickly decided he wanted out like the coward that he was. It's easy to shoot men and women and children defenseless in a church, hiding under pews.
Were you afraid?
I wasn't afraid at all. I was flat terrified. I was terrified. I was so far beyond afraid, it was ridiculous. And that's the silliest question I've ever been asked. But I was dead calm. And every shot he took at me missed. And every shot I hit him, he felt it. And he ran for his vehicle, standing in the middle of the street with the engine running and the driver's side door open. He had planned his getaway. And when he turned to his side, I put one high in his side and I put one in his legs.
Exactly what you were told to do.
Exactly
what you were trained to do.
I was told to do. He slammed the door. He put 2 more shots through the side window, and I saw that glass open up and fall in very slow motion. I couldn't see his head from the reflection of the sun in the glass, but I put one where I believed his head to be. Coroner's report said I split his forehead all the way across. He accelerated, turned the corner, and was running away as fast as he could. He wanted out. All of a sudden, he got hit back, and he wanted out.
So at this point, you've won the gunfight, essentially. In his mind, he's like, all right, this guy's bad business. I don't want to mess with him. I'm out of here.
But I didn't know because he showed no signs of being hit. I didn't know what I'd done.
What weight ammo were you using? 55, 62?
I was using 55 American Eagle.
Just ball ammo?
Ball ammo. That's what I grabbed was the first box of ammo I found. It was a 100-round box of American Eagle ball ammo.
Okay.
Everybody said, oh, that's a bad selection. Well, you
had to do what you had to do.
Yeah, well, and was it a bad selection with Class 3 body armor? I mean, it would have the best penetration of it, but it still didn't penetrate the armor.
Well, your shooting seems like it was quite on. I mean, every shot that you've explained to me was very precise and methodical, and you knew exactly what you were doing. You had perfect mental clarity. You were in the zone, Stephen.
Well, and the last shot even proved even more so. Because by the time I got into the middle of the street, he was about 150 yards away and still fleeing, still accelerating. And I brought the rifle up. I shot through the back windshield. It shattered the back windshield. I just had an EOTech, no magnification, but it shattered the back windshield, went through the driver's side seat, and the police say that shot hit him just right of the left shoulder blade. And again, he had on Class 3 body armor. He topped the hill and out of sight. And I'm standing in the middle of the street thinking, it can't end this way. He's getting away. It can't end this way. And I'm watching him run out of sight. And I looked off to my left. And there was another pickup truck sitting at the stop sign with a guy sitting on his cell phone. And he was just sitting there at the stop sign. I ran over and I tapped on the window and said, that guy just shot up the Baptist church and we need to stop him. Now think about that picture for a moment. He's never met me before in his life.
Two perfect strangers.
Two perfect strangers. And,
wow.
and he just saw a gunfight in front of his face. And he's talking to 911. He's on the phone with dispatch, and they're talking to him because he's witnessing the whole thing as it's happening. And so they're on the phone with him. And I tap on the window and say, that guy just shot up the Baptist church and we have to stop him. Every sane person in this world would have just put his foot on the gas and drove off and left me. But this is Texas we're talking about. We're not known for sanity necessarily. A little bit of commitment, a little bit of what's right and wrong. And the next thing I heard were the locks on the truck come open. And I crawled up in the cab of a truck with a long, tall Texan. He's probably 6'2", 6'3", thin frame, good-looking young man, white Western hat, a big feather sticking out of the hat, and a toothpick hanging out of his mouth. And I'm looking at him, and he's got a longhorn skull tattooed in the middle of his neck, and the horns run up underneath his ears. And I can't make this stuff up.
And without hesitation, he popped the locks on the truck and said,
and when I slammed the door, he never said a word to me. He just accelerated, turned the corner, and set on the phone with 911. And we're running down the road, and we shot across 87. And I know most of your viewers don't know anything about, but 87 is a main thoroughway to the coast from San Antonio. And this is November, and November in Texas, down in the Gulf is when the Reds are running. So on Friday evening, everybody's going to the coast, headed to the coast. Sunday morning, everybody's going back to San Antonio. He flew across 87 without even looking. We could have been hit by anybody headed down to the coast or coming back from the coast. And we flew right across 87, accelerated. We're doing over 95. Johnny says over 95. I believe it. It was a white knuckle ride, baby. And something told me in the back of the head, you need to find out how many rounds you have left. Because I just grabbed a handful of ammunition and loaded it in a magazine. I had no idea how many rounds I had, nor did I have an idea how many rounds I had fired. So I dropped the magazine. I'm looking down at the magazine. I got one round in the top of the magazine and one in the chamber. I got 2 rounds left. And I turned and looked. Again, I didn't know Johnny's name, but I turned and looked at him. I said, tell them, hurry, hurry. Only have 2 rounds left. He's still got on Class 3 body armor. So we're still running into a fight. And the guy's got Class 3 body armor on. And I only have 2 rounds. That right away, Johnny may have just let off the throttle and said, no, we're out. But no, he kept on into the pursuit.
You still got a truck you can run him over with, right? I mean,
I don't know what he was thinking, and I don't know what I was thinking, at that moment. But we're still chasing down the road. We're still in the fight. I got 2 rounds left, and I'm thinking this is going to be serious.
All an American needs is a fighting chance. 2 rounds is better than nothing, right?
Well, and when in France, on the train in France, this is really interesting. A train full of Frenchmen, a terrorist came in and started killing French people on a train. It was 2 unarmed American soldiers that took that terrorist out. God bless America. Maybe we are different. Maybe we deserve the reputation that we get, and we are different.
And this isn't just America. We're talking about Texas.
Yeah, we're talking about Texas.
So this is the plot's thickening. So you guys cross the highway. This guy just barrels through traffic like a moron. Y'all are white knuckling it, 95 miles an hour. You do your press check. You got 2 rounds. Now what's going through your head here? Y'all are continuing?
So what's going on now is Johnny's given them each time he passes by a crossroads. And we're still not seeing him yet because he got quite a jump on us. And we're going past crossroads, and Johnny's letting dispatch know exactly where we're at. And, well, we just crossed this crossroad, and he's still not in sight. And we come over a hill and around a curve, and I see him. It was a silver Ford Escape with the back window blasted out. I said, that's him. We're catching him. And now I'm thinking, maybe my shots mattered, because why would we be catching him at this point? And I looked at Johnny and I said, if you catch him, you're going to have to put him off the road. And Johnny's in a 3/4-ton Dodge truck, 4-door, long wheelbase, a work truck. And Johnny looks at me, and the first words he said to me, I hadn't even heard a word from him at this point because he's talking to dispatch. He looks at me, he said, yep, I already figured that.
With the toothpick and all, huh?
And I'm thinking, oh my God, who am I riding with? And Johnny's sitting back there. You got to picture this too. That cell phone in his left hand, steering wheel in his right hand, doing 95 miles per hour. And he looks at me and says, yep, I already figured that. And he's probably thinking in his head, I always wanted to try to do a pit maneuver.
He didn't get his chance.
I'm going to do a pit maneuver. Big 3/4-ton truck and Ford SUV. He already figured out he was going to put that thing off the road. And as we started catching him, he started slowing down. And he pulled off into the bar ditch. People in other states don't know what a bar ditch is. I figured that out because in my speeches, it's like, what's a bar ditch? Well, we call them bar ditches in Texas, and the reason they call them bar ditches is they borrowed the dirt to make the crown of the road, and it left a ditch. And so we just it first started out as a borrow ditch, and now it's called a bar ditch. And so it's the side of the road, the ditch on the side of the road, and used for drainage and whatever. So I had to make that clear because I didn't know. People in other states didn't know. I thought it was a term that everybody knew. But we call it bar ditch in Texas. He pulled off into the ditch with a road sign right in front of his vehicle and stopped. And I thought he didn't even leave himself a way out because that road sign is right in front of him. And Johnny pulled up behind him, still on the road. He didn't pull out in the ditch, but he's pulled up still on the road with Johnny's front bumper, even with the guy's back bumper.
Oh, wow.
And stopped in the road.
So you're pretty close.
We're pretty close. And I'm thinking, oh, this is real serious now. And Johnny stopped, and the first thing I did is I put the passenger side window down and stuck the rifle out of the passenger window, opened up the door with my left hand, and I was going to step out and use the door as a shield and re-engage the shooter. And as I was stepping out, my foot had not even hit the pavement yet. He accelerated. He took the road sign out in front of him. It flipped over the vehicle. I didn't expect that. I guess they're made where they will break away, and so they won't do that much damage. But it flipped over the vehicle and right off on the back, and he swerved right back up on the road and began to run again. And I barely got my foot back in the truck before Johnny was after him again. And I got my foot in the truck and slammed the door. And we started pursuing again, and we got maybe 3/4 of a mile up the road. He went about 3/4 of the way around the curve that the sign was indicating. And this time he swerved off to the left-hand side of the road, through a fence, and out into a field about 50 yards. And Johnny pulled up on the road and stopped again. And I told Johnny, I said, just get down below the dash and stay out of rifle range, out of bullet range. And, just stay below the dash. You don't have anything you don't have a gun. And I got out, and this time I got out and I put my rifle over the hood of the truck. And Johnny got out doing whatever millennial in this world would do.
Oh.
he was videoing me.
Did he still have the toothpick in his mouth? That's a very important question.
He did. He never lost the toothpick.
Okay, so the toothpick was in play the entire time.
Yeah, well, that's
like a proper Texan.
Yeah. And he was videoing me, and I'm like, really, that's what you want to do? And at this moment, this is really intense because the vehicle's parked at an angle that I really can't see on the driver's side. But I had an EOTech on my rifle, and I had it aimed at the vehicle, and I'm yelling rude obscenities, and I think God will forgive me. I was really mad. And Chris Bird wrote a book, and the subtitle of the book is When Seconds Count, Police Are Only Minutes Away. And it never was more real to me. I never wanted to see red and blue lights more than that day. And I'm not saying anything to be negative about our men and women in blue, because they are, for the most part, running as fast as they can into a bad situation to defend people they don't even know. They're ready to put their life on the line for people they don't even know. So I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea here. But they call police first responders, and I'm going to tell you no. Police are second responders. You are your own first responder. Police aren't ever there when it happens, or rarely ever there when it happens. And usually police get there in time to mop up the blood, take evidence, and hopefully arrest somebody. For 5 to 7 minutes, estimated by the police, 5 to 7 minutes, they were 5 to 7 minutes behind me. I was there with my rifle trained over the hood at the driver's side door. And I even at one point yelled out, "Where are the police?" And then I hear a call off to my left-hand side. I was so focused in front of me, I didn't see him pull up. I heard a call off to the left-hand side. "Driver, get out of your vehicle with your hands up." I turned and looked off to my left, and I could see an officer standing behind the door of his squad car with a pistol in his right hand and a microphone in his left hand. He keyed the mic again and said, "Driver, get out of the vehicle with your hands up." And if I can tell the general public anything about if you're ever involved in this kind of an incident, when the police get there, the police may not know who you are.
Right. They didn't know if y'all were the shooters. They had no idea.
They may not know who you are. So when the police get there, comply, comply, comply. I laid my rifle on the hood of Johnny's truck, and I started to the back of Johnny's truck, palms out, hands over my head, walking slowly to the back of the truck. I wanted the officer to know I'm not the threat.
Did you tell him?
I was just walking back with my hands up and stuff, and he made eye contact with me. He looked at me, he keyed the mic one more time, and he said, "Not you." Okay. I went back and I picked up the rifle and held it over the hood still. He knew that he had a pistol. He was about 100 yards away. He had a pistol. I had a rifle. I was 50 yards away. Even though I had 2 rounds left, I still had a tactical advantage. So
he saw you have the rifle trained across the hood towards the threat?
He did.
The officer did?
He did. But he knew that I wasn't the threat at that point. He had been talking to dispatch and knew that we were chasing the guy. So he knew I wasn't the threat at this point. Johnny had told him that he was driving a pickup and that he was chasing a gray SUV or silver SUV. And when the officer arrived, thank God he knew who I was. You can't depend on that. But the officer knew that at that moment, he needed me as bad as I needed him. And so he showed me more respect at that moment than I ever expected by saying, not you. And I went over and I picked up my rifle and held it over the hood. And if we had been in New York or California, this may have gone down much different. But we're in Texas. So I held my rifle there for another 5-6 minutes before other officers started showing up. This time they were getting AR-15s out of their own trunks of their squad cars and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm indeed done this time. They have all the firepower they need to handle the situation. I pulled my rifle off the hood of the truck and walked over and I stuck it on the toolbox of Johnny's truck at this point. And now I'm trying to hold on to the side of Johnny's bed and get my feet in the shade. Your northern listeners won't understand this. You guys here in Georgia, you understand this, but on November 5th, 2017, that day it was 90 degrees in Texas.
And that blacktop gets hot.
And again, I was barefoot.
Wow.
And my feet were starting to get hot. And now the adrenaline's gone and I'm starting to shake. That's what happens after you do a major adrenaline dump, is when it leaves your system starts to shake, and now I'm feeling pain and my feet are getting hot.
So during this time frame that the perpetrator of this shooting went off the ditch out into the field, you had your rifle trained on him, there was an exchange with the police start showing up, they're pulling ARs out of cases, they're getting ready. What's the shooter doing the whole time? Just sitting there?
I couldn't see inside the vehicle because of the angle. It was parked away.
I see.
But again, it was parked with the back end of the vehicle, plain view from me, and just a very little tilt so I could kind of see the edges of the driver's side window, but I couldn't see in.
Okay.
So I had no idea.
You didn't know if he was getting ready for round 2 or if he was retrieving another gun or if he was reloading, or no telling.
So at this point, I stayed there for 30, 45 minutes, and I'm in an island of myself. I'm the only one down there. And police cars are showing up to my left, blocking the street there. 200 yards up the road to my left, I see a fire truck blocking all the traffic. And off to my right, I see police officers from another county, because I was on a county line, blocking the highway on that side. And I'm 50 yards away from the police line, no clue what's going on. And I'm thinking to myself, what are they waiting for? They're waiting for him to bleed to death. I'm okay with that. But I'd like to know information. I need to know what's going on at this point.
You're vested.
I'm hanging out here, the closest man to the shooter. And I have no clue what they're doing. Well, it turned out that 2 days prior to the shooting, one of the officers got a drone for his birthday with a camera on it. And when all the officers showed up, he said, I got a drone at the house. They said, go home and get it. They wanted to fly a drone over there and look inside the vehicle and see. Made perfect sense. That's when smart. I found that out, but I didn't know that.
Sure.
And 30, 45 minutes down there, I decide I'm going to run back to the police line so I can communicate with somebody. At this point, I'm looking at that 200 yards up the street, and I see my wife's vehicle up there. So my wife has made it down to the crash scene. I didn't even know how she found out or anything, but she was there. My wife's vehicle's there. Did
your daughter finish loading the magazine? At least?
No. So I got all this in my mind. And I was like, okay, I'm going to run back to the police line. I've been here 30, 45 minutes. I'm running back to, and I start to run, and they say, no, stay where you're at. We'll bring up a police cruiser for you to use for cover to get back to us. And so they drove a police car up there, and I was able to kind of squat down and run back to the police line using a cruiser as a guard, cover. And I get back there, and they set me down on the guardrail, and now I'm really coming apart. And there's no one I wanted to speak with more than my own wife. And I could see she was just up the road. And a police officer starts walking by. And I said, excuse me, can I call my wife? He said, sure, go ahead. No, can I use your phone? He looked at me, he says, you don't have a phone? I looked down, I was like, I don't have any shoes on. Phone was the last thing I was worried about, And, oh, okay, well, let me, and he hands me the phone, and I made that call to talk to my wife. And we had a moment. I said, I'm okay. I'm okay. She said, I see that. I can see you walking around. I said, I wasn't wounded. I'm okay. I said, but I need shoes. And she said, well, you can have my Crocs. And I said, well, they're not going to fit my feet, but I'll take anything I can get. And so I asked, and she said, they won't let me down there. And I said, hang on. And I asked officers, can I go down there and get my wife's shoes? No, you need to stay where you're at. I guess he thought I was going to run away. I said, but my feet are hot. Well, he opens up the back of his squad car and says, you can sit in the back of my squad car. I'm like, no, I'm good. I figured they were going to cuff and stuff me at some point anyway. I did not want to make it easy, because once they set you in the back of that squad car and they close the door, it doesn't open from the inside. I was like, no, I'm cool.
There's not a whole lot of room in there either.
No, there's not a lot of room in there. I didn't want to get in the back of a squad car. And it took them... They hopped me from police department to police department and put me in the front seat of their cars at the time, and I did exactly what the lawyers tell you not to do. I got diarrhea of the mouth. They kept promising me, well, if you give us a statement, you can go home. Only thing I wanted to do in this world was go home.
Nothing more than
go home. And they'd say, well, Comal County is here. They want you to do a statement with them. They put me in a police car and take my statement from that one. And then Wilson County wants you to give a statement, and they put me in Wilson County's car, and I do the statement with them. And then they kept saying, well, when the Texas Rangers get there, Texas Rangers in the state of Texas, there's Rangers in other states that they don't have the power the Texas Rangers do. And Texas Rangers are elite. They are absolutely the elite law enforcement. Texas Rangers will police the police in Texas. Texas Rangers have authority over a sheriff in the state of Texas. Texas Rangers are truly the badass police department in the state of Texas. They said, when the Texas Rangers get here, they'll handle the whole scene, and they'll take your statement, and then you can go home. Well, finally, the Texas Rangers came, and I gave them a statement. All I wanted to do, and that's to my defense, and I'm going to tell you, shut up and lawyer up, because your story's going to change. And the reason your story changes is because when the adrenaline goes away, that moment you don't remember things 100%, and it takes you a while. And that's why they do this with police involved in a shoot. They won't interview them or even let them talk to the police for 48 hours after the shooting.
A little cool down time to kind of reassess and gather the facts.
And to gather the facts, because your story may change once you remember it properly. And that's why they tell you, shut up and lawyer up, because you may not remember things 100%. And I remembered things better later on. And so it's best to lawyer up and shut up. Tell them, look, I'm willing to work with you as much as possible, but now is not the time.
Did all the law enforcement officers treat you with respect, courtesy? Were they good to you?
They absolutely were. They treated me like as if I was some sort of a hero. When I was in the Texas Rangers, the only thing that really got me, because I had a hunting trip planned, and the only thing
different
that really,
kind of hunting that you're doing there.
I had planned to go to Wisconsin for the first time to hunt in Wisconsin, and I was really excited about that hunting trip. And when I did the statement to the Texas Rangers, it kind of reminded me of an old West movie, because at the end of it, he said, well, thank you for your statement. Don't leave town anytime soon. Oh, my hunting trip's gone. What am I going to do? So after I got out of the vehicle with the Texas Ranger, I started walking slowly back that 200 yards to where my wife's car was. And this lady yelled out from behind me, Mr. Willeford, I need to speak with you for a moment. And I turned around, and there was a very pleasant-looking lady about my age, came up behind me, and she had tears flowing down her cheeks. And she said, Mr. Willeford, I had friends in that church. And I said, how bad was it? Because I still didn't know. And she said, it was really bad. And that's the only answer I could get from anybody. I said, who? She said, we don't know yet, but it's really bad. And she said, I wanted to tell you, if I can do anything for you, here's my card. I'm the DA of Wilson County. Whoa, give me that card.
Yeah.
That would be the woman that was prosecuting me if I did anything incorrectly. I wanted her on my side. And
to be fair, Stephen, how can anyone know what to do in a situation like that until you're presented with it? It's not like we try to train, right? We try to go through all the different motions of gun handling and safety and medical. And we go through all the training that we can to make sure we're proficient. But at the end of the day, every single situation is completely different. How are you to know how to respond to that situation? I mean, that's a scary situation that you were dealt that hand.
I would suggest to you, because I truly believe God trained me ahead of time for this particular situation. Because why would a plumber need to know how to shoot around body armor? Yet I was trained to shoot around body armor. So if you go to your local shooting range and start shooting, please do. A lot of your shooting ranges offer league competition. And we used to shoot as a league competition. And they asked me, what's a league competition? Well, it's like a bowling league, except for men, and start thinking when you hear about a situation, whether it's the shooting in El Paso at a Walmart, whether it's the shooting in a school, whether it's, you work it out in your head, Aurora, Colorado, in the theater. What would I do? What would I do? And I would always before this happened, because I think us sheepdogs are wired a little bit different than the normal person. And if you're that kind of person that feels like you're a sheepdog and you would react, then start thinking about and deciding every situation what you would do. And I didn't originate this saying, but it's perfect for this occasion, is your body will never go where your mind has never been. And I could have never imagined running across the street to defend a church. But every other situation I put myself in and decided what I would do. And that gets your mind working through these situations where you train yourself, and your brain does what it's trained to do. And if you've never trained yourself, you'll do exactly what you've trained yourself to do, and that's nothing. I'm not saying that everybody needs to train and run into gunfire. And I'm not saying that you must be trained to be able to carry a gun. In the Walmart in El Paso, there were 8 concealed carry permit holders in that Walmart that day that had their guns. None of the 8 confronted the shooter. And I'm going to say because none of the 8 had ever thought about what he would do if there was a shooter.
It's easy to just throw a gun on your hip and say, all right, I'm carrying a gun. But it's one thing to deploy that gun into a two-way range.
What I will tell you is they got each one of those 8 got their families out safely. That's honorable, and that's okay. If you just want to carry a gun to get your family out safely, that's fine. But if you see yourself as a sheepdog, then you better start training, because for me and other sheepdogs, other police officers off duty and whatever, they thought about these things. And they're going to confront the shooter. People like me will confront a shooter. And the best way for me to defend my family is say, hit that door running. And don't look back. Don't worry about me. I'm going to confront the shooter, because if I'm occupying that shooter, he's not worried about where my family goes. And if I can save my family, and in the process save yours too, that's the attitude and the mindset of a sheepdog.
All right, so a few questions. All right, this guy went to get his drone. All right, did the drone ever come into play in terms of them trying to go and figure out what this guy was doing in the field in his vehicle?
They flew the drone over. They looked inside the vehicle and determined that he was dead.
So died of his wounds.
Police say that he committed suicide. I never heard the shot. Police say he committed suicide. He committed suicide.
Now, when you walk back down the road, you're going 200 yards down the road, your wife is in the vehicle. Tell us about how that was for you when you saw your wife. After what did y'all have a moment there? Talk about that a little bit.
We had a moment. We had a moment.
How'd you feel when you saw your wife?
Relief. My family was okay. I cried. Be real honest. For those of you that think real men don't cry, then okay, I'm not a real man.
Yeah, then you're a liar if you think men don't cry.
But I had a cry.
Wow,
and I've got a friend that's a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, a chaplain. And the first thing I did was call him. He's a professional counselor and stuff. And I said, John, I think I killed someone. And you're going to hear about it on the news very quickly. And I started working my head around what had happened. And it doesn't matter whether he killed himself or whether I killed him. It's still the same result as that because of my engagement, he died. And I'm okay with that. But I'm going to tell you, if you're a man and you're involved in this and you think you're too tough to go seek out counseling, you got a problem. I'm going to say go seek out counseling, go work it out. And I don't feel guilty for what I did.
What'd the chaplain say to you?
He told me that basically, and he read some scriptures in the Bible where we are defenders. And he said it was righteous. It was a righteous shoot that saved lives. And I have the highest respect for him. His name's John Wood.
Wow.
I have the highest respect for him. And he's been a family friend for... Before my wife and I were married. He was our friend. And we've been married coming up on 33 years this year. So
how'd you feel when you saw your daughter? When you went home, she was still home? You told her to go home?
I walked in the door, and it was the strangest thing because this had hit news. I was at the crash site for 4.5 hours. They kept me
That's
there.
even harder for her to have to wonder what's going on and not
They
know.
kept me there for 4.5 hours. Well, my wife called them and at least told them that I was all right.
Good.
Well, my family and my friends from all over the San Antonio area heard that there was a shooting in Sutherland Springs, and they didn't know that I was involved in it. But Sutherland Springs is under 600 people total. So by the time I got home, family and friends had flooded my house. I had over 20 members of my family and friends in my house waiting for me to come back.
And what were their reactions when you came
When
home?
I walked in the door, I cried with them all. And I went through a gauntlet of hugs.
Wow.
And stuff, and my mouth was dry.
I'm sure your feet were hurting.
Oh, well,
from all the
biggest thing was my
heat.
mouth was dry because when you have a dump of adrenaline and it goes away, your body does crazy things. My mouth was dry. So I walked straight through after all the hugs and stuff and into the kitchen, and I drew me a glass of water and started to drink it, and there was a doorbell ring. And I heard my daughter in the distance answer the door, and she yells out, "Dad, FBI and Homeland Security are here to talk to you."
I'm sure she was so relieved to see you.
And she said, "I never thought I would say that statement." And one of my friends said, "Oh, we knew this was coming for a long time." Didn't know what the circumstances were going to be, but we knew this was coming for a long time. Your friends joke and stuff and bring things back to being real. And I went and I gave an interview with the FBI and Homeland Security.
Did they treat you with respect?
They did. They asked me how many shots I fired. I said, "I don't know." They said, "How many shots did you have?" I said, "Well, there's a box of ammunition. It says it's a 100-round box. I had 2 rounds left in my gun. Count up what's in that box. You'll know what I fired." I said, "But can't tell you any other than that. In the heat of the moment, I'm not saying 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, and gosh, they know that. They know you're not going to sit there and count your shots in the middle of a gunfight.
Yeah, it was a ridiculous question, and I'm talking to them, and they're patting me on the back and treating me like I'm something special. And
you were, man. Don't downplay that, Stephen.
Well, he said, "Do you have any questions?" I said, "Well, the Texas Ranger told me not to go anywhere." And I said, "I have a hunting trip. How long am I supposed to hang around? Am I going to get to go on my hunting trip?" And he said, "Who told you that?" I said, "The Texas Ranger that interviewed me." And one of them looked at the other. He said, "That would be Terry Snyder." And he looked at me and said, "Mr. Willeford, we'll talk to Mr. Snyder about that. I think you're good to go on your hunting trip."
I mean, that is a typical Texan to have a glass of water and then the first thing go through your mind, well, my family's safe. Do I get to go on my hunting trip now? It's like back to business, I can only imagine what had to be going through your heart and through your mind. I mean, the relief of knowing your family was safe and also the terror of knowing what just occurred and that it could have been so much worse had you not done anything. And despite your best efforts, still a tragic event unfolds. So it's like there's all these emotions going through your head, the joy, the fear, the terror, the sorrow, like all of those things in a giant mixing bowl in your head. That has to be a very taxing thing to go through, Stephen.
Oh, I was exhausted.
I can imagine.
And couldn't sleep. So let me tell you a little bit about my community and what happened within the church. 26 souls went home to Jesus that day. And I truly believe that. In the church, I referred to Julie Workman earlier, been shot through the breast, and he skipped one off of the concrete into her leg. Julie Workman was an emergency room nurse. Her son had been shot in the back, and our other son ran out the side door and ran across the street. Julie didn't know what shape her other son was in. She knew one son didn't have any feeling in his legs, and he was laying flat on. So Julie stood up, and the very first thing Julie recognized was a little 5-year-old girl that had been swinging around her legs and singing praises to God the moments before the shooter started killing people. And she saw this little girl that he had executed put the gun to the side of her head and pulled the trigger and yelled, "Shut up." And Julie started screaming. Gunny Macias. Gunny's quite a character. Gunny's about probably 6'3", retired Marine, salt and pepper gray hair, pulled back into a ponytail. Gunny looks like a wolf. The eyes look like not a man you'd want to mess with. Gunny Macias, a retired Marine, and nobody seems to know Gunny's first name. They just call him Gunny. And once I said, "Oh, you were a Marine," he said, "No, once a Marine, always a Marine."
That's a fact.
Gunny Macias had been shot 5 times in the abdomen. Gunny couldn't even stand. He was shot up and he couldn't even stand on his own. And Gunny Macias, when the shooter left, Gunny Macias yelled out in a loud booming voice, "Hallelujah, hallelujah, even in this, praise God." And then Julie screamed, and he looked at Julie. He said, "Julie, wake up. None of this took God by surprise. You were made for this moment, and we need you." With his Marine voice barking at her, he woke her up out of her funk, and still bleeding from her own injuries, she started tying tourniquets and saving lives within the church, with her son laying face down, paralyzed from the waist down. And then a little girl came to Gunny and said, "Gunny, I'm scared." And Gunny started singing "Jesus Loves Me" with a little 7-year-old girl. What a Marine. What a man.
Wow. I mean, how can you even begin to just fathom the amount of evil it takes for a person to carry out something like that? I mean, just pure evil. Pure evil.
I truly believe that no ordinary man can do what he did and be as evil as he was without an evil spirit in him. I believe in an unseen world and an unseen battle in this world that's between good and evil. I believe that why would he have dropped a gun in the church when I yelled out? I believe that God called him out, and he dropped a rifle and confronted me with a pistol. I truly believe that there was unseen evil there, and I believe that what was within me was more powerful than what was within him. I don't believe in coincidences, and I've said that already before. That day, the very hospital that I normally work for, University Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, was doing an active shooter drill on a Sunday. They had never done a drill on a Sunday before. And the doctors and the nurses were complaining, "Why are we doing a drill on a Sunday when we could be spending time with our families in church? Why are we here?" And the real call came out at that moment. And they were all hands on deck. All the doctors and nurses were already there and were able to get all 20 ORs up and running before the first victim showed up. And if you don't believe in God, how can you pass this off as a coincidence? There is no way. Hank Farnett, the very first police officer that was on the scene, Hank and his sergeant and a game warden were the first 3 that came into the church charging. Hank is one of those men, and when my wife tells the story, she says, "He looks all at 12 years old." And I said, "Come on, baby, give him at least 15. He's got to be at least 15, He's just one of these guys that look forever young." But Hank had been collecting trauma kits, several trauma kits out of his own pocket. and putting them in his police cruiser for years before this. And the other officers, why in the world are you spending your own hard-earned money on trauma kits? Are you expecting a mass shooting? And Hank would always say, you never know. And that day, because Hank was ready for that moment, he opened up the back of his police cruiser and pulled out trauma kits and was able to pass them around. And he tied 4 tourniquets and saved 4 lives before he left the church to the crash scene.
I've always been a huge proponent for the concept of, if you're going to carry a firearm and potentially take somebody's life, right, that you also need to have the capabilities to save a life as well. And honestly, what is going to be the greater chance that you're going to have to deal with, shooting someone or dealing with an injury? Now, regardless of whether or not it's a shooting, it could just be an injury, right? The world's a dangerous place. Things happen, motorcycle wrecks, there's all sorts of things. So medical preparedness, boys and girls, so important to make sure that you have the ability to deal with medical at any time. And very good thinking on his part. Very astute thinking on his part.
Well, Hank, I can't say enough good about Hank.
Good guy.
He's become a friend of mine now, and I call him, and he works night shift in Lavernia. They've promoted him and stuff, and he works night shift. And I, once or twice a month, I call him up and say, hey, meet me for coffee while he's on duty. And we sit and have coffee together, and he's brand new father, got his very first son, probably 4 months old now,
So you've told me that membership in the church has actually grown since the shooting.
So
it's a bigger church now?
Actually, yes. So there were 49 people in that church that day. 26 died. 20 more were injured, shot. Only 3 people walked out of that church without a bullet.
Man.
Now, even during the worst of COVID, we had 200 attendees. We never, during COVID, social distanced. We never demanded anybody wear a mask. If you wanted to wear a mask, you could wear a mask. We put on little stickers on the side that says, I hug. Doesn't mean that anybody has to hug you.
But you were available for hugs.
But we were available. Before we initiated that, the secretary of the church came walking through, and I didn't know how anybody felt about it. And I offered her an elbow bump, and she looked at me, she shook her head, said, if you can't hug me, don't even bother, and kept walking. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, come back. Bring it in. Let's have a
Stephen, who now handles security for the church?
We have a safety response team now, and we train together.
We.
Yes.
So you are on the safety response team, Stephen.
I am. I'm not a big part of it because I travel a lot. But when I'm there, I'm what they call a floater. So I float around. I can go from zone to zone. And so when you set up a safety response team, you have people that are in their zones. And you talk together on a radio. And if something happens, you're supposed to stay in your zone. Because that way somebody doesn't do a distraction, hey, look over here, and then go attack somewhere else when everybody runs there. Mm-hmm. So we have what's called floaters. And since I'm gone in and out, they can't schedule me for a zone or anything. So I'm a floater. If something happens, I run to the problem.
They send the dog in.
I run to the problem and help out whoever's working that zone. And that's the way we train. And everybody else is to stay in their zone because you don't want a distraction to distract you to go somewhere and then something else happens somewhere else.
So when you're at the church, you're armed with your rifle, you've got your response team.
No, I'm armed with my pistol.
You've got your security team. You've got your rifles on standby, I'm sure, more than likely. Right? I'm sure there's just such a special environment that exists in that church when they know that Stephen Willeford is in that church.
Well, I don't know. I would hope so. After the shooting, it left such a big hole in the church. My wife and I decided that we would start worshiping at that church. And people say, why did you start going to that church then? Well, it left a hole in their mature Christian leadership, and we felt like we had a place to fit in. And when I first started going to the church, honestly, I didn't think I was going to be able to continue. Because when I first started going to the church, they treated me much different than they treated everybody else. And I just wanted my place back in my community. I didn't want to be treated special. Don't put me on a pedestal. Don't put me on a pedestal because I don't deserve that. I'm not anybody's savior. Jesus Christ is the only savior in this world. And if you put a person on a pedestal, they're gonna fall off. And I didn't want that. And I went to a friend of mine, and he asked me how things were going, and I said, I really personally don't know that I can continue to go to that church because people treat me different there, and I don't want to be treated different. And he put his arm around me, and he's one of those friends that just absolutely brings things back to, what they're supposed to be, and, talk to you in cold, hard facts. And he said, look, if I came over and saved your daughter's life, he said, would I have a special place in your home? And I said, you would. He said, then give them some time. And I did, and I became not something special. I'm just one of them. I'm just one of my community again. And that's all I ever wanted to be.
Wow, man. I mean, that's such a special story, Stephen. And listen, you've shared this story with me before, not in this amount of detail. Now, you went into a lot of detail here, and it just blows me away at how strong that community is and the willingness of people to put themselves in danger. I mean, a perfect stranger who took you, yeah, he could have said, no, man, that's dangerous. I ain't doing that. But this is Texas, right? Texans always respond to danger with a equal or greater amount of danger.
I tell people all the time, Texas isn't necessarily a geographical location. Texas is more of an attitude. And people say, you got people moving from out of your state wanting to do, well, and that's great if you adopt the attitude of Texas when you move into Texas. We don't want these outsiders. I said, well, if they're the right outsiders, we do. Right. Oh, no, we want to keep with just Texas. I said, think about the, most famous Texans and the people that you think of that founded Texas. Travis, Sam Houston, Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett. None of them came from Texas. They moved to Texas.
Crockett was from Tennessee. He was a senator in Tennessee, was he not?
Yes, he was.
And actually came out to the Alamo to defend the Alamo as a sitting senator.
Oh, no,
is that correct?
no.
This was after his political career?
After his political career, he got voted out. And he then made the statement that's a famous statement. He said, y'all can all go to hell. I'm going to Texas.
Texas is a meeting place for the brave.
It is. And that's what I say. It is more not necessarily a geographical location as it is an attitude. You want to come to Texas, don't bring your liberal views. Bring your attitude is, I'm going to make this place a better place for everybody around me. That's an attitude. Back in George Bush, the second George Bush, they said, some people say that I strut when I walk. In Texas, we just call that walking.
Spoken like a Texan.
My wife was from St. Louis, Missouri. And I tease and tell people, I had to go all the way to Missouri to find a wife so my family tree would branch. Because I'm kin to most of the people around me.
Yeah.
So when she moved to Texas, she had went to Harding Christian University, where 52% of Harding Christian University's student body is from Texas. And she said, I grew to hate Texans when I was in Harding. I swore I'd never live in Texas and I'd never marry a Texan. She said, because Texans were arrogant about their state. All of the Texas students just talked about Texas like it was some great place to be, and they were all arrogant, and I hated them for it. And she said, and then my parents moved out of Missouri, and my sister was living in Texas, so I decided I wanted to be close to my nephews. I moved to Texas, and she said, I met my husband, and then I realized that Texans weren't arrogant. They were just right.
So, at this point in the discussion, I would like to ask you, so what bit of advice would you give to people who are looking to be better prepared, looking to potentially, if they're ever presented with a situation like what you dealt with, what would you do different? What would you recommend people do? I mean, what would be some just good advice you could give someone from all your years of experience, the things you've experienced?
So start thinking when you hear about a situation, start thinking about it. Because again, like I said earlier, your body won't go where your mind's never been. So start thinking about those situations, start shooting and shooting often and training. Should it be a prerequisite for you carrying? No. No, it should not. But understand, the more training you have, the more likely you will go into action. You know, people say, how could you do what you did? And I say, how could you not? And they say, but he changed your life. And I say, you know, he did. He changed my life that day, but he would have changed my life one way or another. The difference is I chose how he changed my life. And you need to think about this. Because when it happened, no one would have blamed me for staying inside my house. My family wasn't in danger. No one would have blamed me for doing nothing. And no one would have even known who I was. But the next morning, when I looked in the mirror and shaved my face, I would know more about myself than I ever knew before. Because I would be looking at that man in the mirror and thinking, you coward. You had the tools, you had the training, you had the ability to do something when your community was dying and you did nothing. And I don't think I could have lived with that guy.
Wow. I mean,
something someone brought up to me, and I didn't think about this either. You live your life. And when you die, it's not necessarily about how you died. It's about how you lived. Because we're all going to die. Every one of us is going to die. I got bad news for you guys in the audience. You're going to die. You know? And it's not about how you die. It's about how you live. My daughter came running to me. And he made me think about this. My daughter came running to me when she thought there was shooting going on. He said, you need to think about what that means. He said, why did your daughter come to you?
Because you'd have the answer, the solution. You'd know what to do.
Because she knew her daddy could fix anything. Now,
right.
Would she have loved me any less if I had not fixed this problem? Probably not. But would she have looked at me differently? She knew her daddy was going to do something. She was watching me.
Wow, man.
Now, when she looks at me, what does she think about her daddy? You know, we want to give an impression to our children. We want them to know what integrity is about. We want them to know what bravery is. We try to teach them. And do I think of myself as a hero? I say no. I'm just a common man. Do I think of what I did as being brave? I will say yes.
Oh, you better believe it's brave.
Because bravery isn't the absence of fear, but what you do in the face of it. So now when my little girl looks at her daddy and thinks of me as Superman, and every child, unless their father has done something horrible to give them another idea, every child that is raised right thinks of their fathers as Superman. And when my daughters or my son look at me. So I was being interviewed, and my son, this was shortly after the shooting, and my son came in the room. He said, "Sorry, Dad, I don't mean to interrupt the interview." He said, "But my wife and I are leaving, and I wanted to say bye." And I was 55 years old the day this happened. And so shortly after I was given the interview, and he broke in on the interview, he said, "I have to." And she said, no problem. The lady that was doing the interview, no problem. We'll just cut and paste, and so yeah, you can say goodbye. And I hugged my son, and I still hug my son, and I kissed him on the cheek and said bye. And went back, and I sat down for the interview, and the lady doing the interviews said, "So, now that your father's a hero, what do you think of him?" And my son said something that just filled my heart. He said, "I've always known my father was a hero. Now the rest of the country knows it too."
That's awesome, man.
And he walked out. And it was hard for me to finish that interview.
Oh, I know. I can only imagine.
Am like I am right now. Again, I'm just an everyday hero. And what I mean by an everyday hero is a man or a woman that spends their life raising their children and giving them good values and teaching them who God is every day, and does this 24/7 and raises a family. Those are the everyday heroes. And those are the ones that matter.
Yep. And we need more of that in our society. I mean, not to go down this particular rabbit hole, but it is very true. I mean, look at the degradation of our society. Look at the people that we're seeing that are the products of these broken households. And it's a terrible thing. I mean, I come from a broken household. When you talk about your family, your kids, your wife, I know when I was out in Nevada hanging out with you, we talked a little bit. Maybe that's for a future interview. We'll talk a little bit more about your upbringing, which is a fascinating story. But the stories you tell me about your family and the way that you were brought up, I didn't get that type of an upbringing. And your kids should consider themselves very lucky to have a father like you who is so principled and true to himself and true to his values. And I think that's a pretty amazing story. And I think that it really does speak volumes for American spirit. It tells a story of American grit and spirit, and that's what we do. We do what's necessary, even at the expense of up to our own lives, if necessary. We'll do anything for our communities, anything for our families, anything for our kids. And that's the thing. When all the anti-gun world who thinks that gun owners are terrible people, or that we're racists or bigots, or all of these random terms that they call us, they don't see the Stephen Willefords of the world. They don't know people like Stephen, who literally wrote his community a blank check. You didn't know. Going into that situation, you didn't know if you were going to lose your life or not. You put a cause and a purpose above yourself. And that's what Americans do. We put other people above ourselves.
I tell police officers all the time, thank you for what you do. Thank you for putting on that uniform in the morning. Thank you for strapping on a vest and putting on that badge. Because every officer out there that chooses to serve in that capacity, in the morning when they put on that vest and that badge and they walk out the door, they kiss their wife goodbye or their husband goodbye and walk out the door, what they're telling the rest of the world is that there's still something worth dying for in this country. Because if there's nothing worth dying for, there's nothing worth living for. And anyone that chooses to serve in the military or law enforcement and put their lives on the line, and they know they are every morning, they're choosing to put their life on the line that is what for the things that are truly worth dying for.
I can't think of a more worthy cause than what you did that morning, knowing exactly what the costs were, and to know the costs and to do it anyway. I mean, isn't that what John Wayne said? Bravery is about knowing that it's dangerous and saddling up anyway, right?
Well, again, it's not about how we die. And I'm going to tell you, I couldn't have lost that day. If I would have lost my life, I would have woke up in the arms of Jesus Christ. That's who I am. That's who I know. I go off the promise that I've been given. Okay? And I trust in that promise. And even if I would have died, I still would have left a legacy for my family.
Wow, man. Stephen, I really wholeheartedly appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about this. I know this is sensitive for you. I know that you go around and you tell this story to a lot of people, and I know that it does, to some degree, you probably kind of, the way you're going to tell it, and the events, and you sort of have this ritual in your head as to how you explain it to people. But I feel like the way that you explain this to me, I feel like this is probably the deepest that you've ever dove into this subject. I know I asked you a lot of very specific questions that might be hard for you, but I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about this. And listen, I feel lucky to get to be a guy that knows Stephen Willeford.
Well, thank you. And I'm just a redneck. I'm just a redneck.
I'm just a redneck too, friend.
That's not a bad term, by the way.
It's a term of endearment.
It is. The redneck's the guy that stops and helps you fix your flat on the side of the road.
That's a fact. You are welcome to come on my channel anytime you want and discuss anything you want.
Well, thank you for having me on.
And we are going to have so many more talks. I just know that you're going to be my friend for life, Stephen. I know that.
Amen.
And you've got a friend in me. I want you to know that.
Amen.
Well,
got a friend here too.
We have a lot of awesome things that we're going to be doing today. So Stephen has been hanging out. He's visiting me for a couple of days. So you haven't seen the last of Mr. Willeford. We're going to do a couple of more videos. It's going to be so much fun. I know you guys are going to love it. I will not spoil the surprise. So you will see more content coming out with Stephen and I. I wanted to take this moment really to allow Stephen the opportunity and the microphone to discuss his experience, to discuss the tragedy of it, the victory of it, the strife of it, the love, the compassion of it. Because these stories are what defines us as people. They define our country. They define, in many ways, our culture, right? The culture of manhood, the culture of, using firearms to protect the innocent. That's a culture that our entire country was founded and built on, right? We are who we are today because of men and women like Stephen Willeford. So I consider myself privileged and lucky to get to have some time with you to myself, quite frankly, and I have a feeling that we're going to make a lot more content together, Stephen.
Thank you.
So, where can folks find you on social media if they want to go follow you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Good Gun Willie, Good Gun Guy Willie. That's what it is. Okay. And so, yes, I've recently started to tweet.
Are you enjoying Twitter? You don't have to answer that. So Twitter is a bitter taste sometimes.
and I also have a thebarefootdefender.com.
Okay.
Is my website, and you can see more about it and stuff at thebarefootdefender.com.
I will put all of Stephen's social media handles down in the description box below. I would encourage you to definitely go over and follow him, subscribe to his YouTube channel, check out his website, and support him any way you can. He's just such a great guy, and he's going around and just spreading this message to as many people as possible and trying to spread the importance of the Second Amendment, of armed citizenry, of personal responsibility, of bravery, of compassion. I mean, these are stories that more people need to hear, and I support Stephen's efforts every step of the way that I possibly can do from my end. But check him out. He's a great guy, a model American.
I also work for GOA now.
Oh, of course.
So we got to put that out there that you can find GOA at gunowners.org.
Yep.
Please go to gunowners.org, sign up, help us in the fight.
Absolutely. And it goes without saying, look, I am the Georgia State Director for Gun Owners of America as well. So Stephen and I both work for GOA. I technically volunteer for GOA. You work for GOA.
I work for GOA.
But this is what you're doing full time. You're going around and you're
what
giving
I'm
these
doing,
seminars.
and it's beginning to be really full time.
Wow.
And I'm just honored. And people bring up other organizations, and I'll tell them, you know what? I'm a lifetime member of NRA. Mm-hmm. I'm a life member of Second Amendment Foundation. I'm a life member of TSRA and GOA. I choose to work for GOA because they truly believe more on the lines of what I believe, that there is no compromise. We've got our backs against the wall, and we're in the fight of our life.
That's right. So if you join GOA, I know Mr. Willeford would appreciate it. I would appreciate it. No pressure. We would love to have you in our ranks, especially here in Georgia. We have a lot going on, and we could use all the support we can get. So thank you all so much for watching today's video. I know this is a long one. If you're still here with me at the end of this video, I appreciate all the years of support. We've been at this almost 15 years now, so it's been a long road, but I'm really enjoying the direction that the channel's taking. And, we obviously still have a ton of awesome things that we're doing that we intend to, keep things going with the 5 guns and the meltdowns and the gun gripes and all sorts of things we're doing. But I really do enjoy this type of format because it allows me to really allow others to come on my channel and tell these amazing stories. And what an amazing story, Stephen. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you,
God
pal.
bless.
God bless you. All right, I'm out. See ya.